Welcome to VFX and Chill. I'm Seth, and with me today is my friend who is a constant stream of tutorials. A constant stream. My friend who's a constant stream. That's a very weird thing to say about someone. He's a constant stream of tutorials and resources for the world of Cinema 4D, and the founder of Rocket Lasso. Please welcome Mr. Chris Schmidt. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you very much. I do stream every week, so you could say I am a constant stream.
A constant stream of a man. Also with us, as always, is the great Michael in the sky. Michael, how are you, sir?
I'm doing very well. Life is good. Life is fantastic.
All right, that's enough of Michael for now. Now, Chris, sorry, Michael. It's good to see you. We've got a very fun show today. You have plans that excite me greatly. First, before we do literally anything else, I do want to go way back and talk about one of the first things that you and I ever worked on together. Something that I think most people may be unaware of. One of our most important collaborations, and it's this video of you at the Pinball Hall of Fame in Las Vegas playing with what must be a 100-year-old musical clown puppet named Peppy. Do you remember this?
I 100% remember. The Pinball Hall of Fame is great, but I'm not that into pinball. So instead, there's 4 buttons on this game, and it just makes the hands and the feet dance. And you know what? It's pretty wonderful.
It is. This video cracks me up because you couldn't animate something like a character performance from you so perfect. It's like you've turned off all the joints except for your shoulders, and you're just like, bop, ba boop, ba boop, ba boop. And every time I watch it, it makes me laugh because there's no rhyme or reason to the dancing. It's just make the clown move.
Yeah. And on top of that, they had the audio that played from the machine was the Jetsons theme, which is the most random thing it could be possibly playing. A 100-year-old clown playing the Jetsons.
I forgot about that. Do you think they have just music boxes in the back that they're like, whatever, just grab that one and put it in? It just happened to be the Jetsons.
No idea, but it's wonderful. My third favorite game at that whole place.
And the first two are?
Well, the number 2 is Creepy Baby Baseball. And if you've ever hung out with us during NAB at the pinball party, then Creepy Baby Baseball is an absolute must. But number 1 is the claw machine, which is full of rubber ducks. And I spend my entire time getting rubber ducks and teaching people how to get the rubber ducks. And we make sure everybody gets one.
This has become a great tradition.
Yeah, I've got one right here. I've got my rubber ducky right here at my desk at any moment.
The best part about it is,
look at that.
It's a mechanical claw machine. So there's no randomness. You actually are mechanically turning a wheel. So you actually could interact with it as it falls and try and swing it back and forth. And it adds a lot to it. If I were ever to buy an old machine or even try and build something, that would be something I'd like to do.
I love that. That's one of my favorite. The pinball party itself is one of my favorite traditions of NAB. Because it is just everybody I like in this industry all under one roof. And pretty much no one I don't like. And I don't know how we manage to do it every time, but it's like all the coolest people, and there's tons of beer, tons of food, and tons of really cool people. And this clown, Peppy. So I do have one more, I haven't seen it in a while. Is Peppy still alive? And... well, when you played him, did he transfer an ancient evil from his body to yours in hopes of furthering a centuries-old curse? He looks like he's carrying an ancient evil. The only reason that would be back there. And it looks like the kind of machine that would be in a dark, in there and everything else is off, and then it's the only thing on. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like the Zoltar machine, but it turns you into a clown.
Yeah,
I always assumed that's where Chris got his magical Cinema 4D skills, was the ragdoll physics transfer.
Is this your origin story?
Yeah,
your origin story is Peppy?
It can at least be the origin of the ragdoll tutorial. Let's go with that.
Okay, perfect. Taught you everything. All right, that's all. I just wanted to make sure the world was aware of this video because it brings me great joy. Now, speaking of great joy, Rocket Lasso just released a brand new plugin because you do that once a week now. And this was roughly 13 seconds ago it came out, right?
Yeah, this only just launched 2 days ago. You didn't even know that this was releasing before you asked me as a guest on the show, but I'm super excited. It is our second plugin in a month, and keep an eye out, everybody. We're going to have another plugin in about 3 weeks, which is just crazy turnaround time, but we're really trying to get these out the door. It should calm down after that. But this was really exciting. It's mesh to spline. The idea being you can feed in geometry and convert it to a spline, but it's a live link. So the ability to feed in animated character, create all sorts of crazy effects, extract things like rail splines from a model and let those drive like your sweeps or my favorite thing about it is the idea of converting to splines using a lot of different settings. It's a pretty advanced tool overall. But in third-party renderers, you can render those splines out crazy fast. So something like Redshift, which doesn't have any kind of tune shading yet, maybe in the future, but right now you can do splines, and splines render so quick. And you can render, of course, in vanilla cinema with Sketch and Tune or Hair and get nice, quick results there. Like that car animation right there at full resolution took 12 minutes to render. It was like, oh my God, it was so quick. I've mentioned the story yesterday during my stream, but I was setting it up. It's like, okay, I got to go eat dinner. I'll set up a big long render so when I come back, I can check it out. And I hit render and I turn away and I look back and it was already done with like 3 frames. I was like, what? So I like cranked it to full res and it was still done in 12 minutes.
That's insane. That's crazy. And I love these results you're showing in the promo. They're so cool.
Yeah. And every result you see there are things I came up with and rendered in the last 2 weeks. Like we had very short turnaround on shipping this thing. So it was exciting and very fun to play with and very quick to render things out. And playing with splines, like unlocking the power splines, they've always been great, but now we can do so much more. So
I just want to say that "Don't Mesh Around" is by far the best tagline for any plugin.
It's right in Michael's wheelhouse. Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, it's so good.
We allow ourselves one like cheesy line per launch. So that was the one. My brother actually came up with that. He's like, "Oh, perfect! I love it." Immediately wrote it down.
Michael, could you live on just one cheesy line per launch?
I don't think I could.
I don't think you could either.
I really don't.
It's harsh.
We're very matter of fact here. It's like, no, here's a thing. Here's the result you can get. It's like, yeah, we'll do one cheesy one.
I'm an all you can eat pun fay.
Good God. All right. I think we actually have a clip of Mesh to Spline in action. Do you mind if I play the clip?
Oh yeah.
I don't know.
Incredible. Simply incredible. Just look at what that plugin can do, especially with the powers of Redshift combined as well.
Yeah. 12 minutes to render.
Chris, talk to me now. Talk Ghostbusters to me, Chris. Talk Ghostbusters straight to me.
Yes, 100%.
So what's this? You showed me this. Tell me what it is.
That is an animation that I was brought on to help out with, put together by my friend Aaron Becker and Amador. And Aaron Becker runs a company called Filmograph out in LA, and they got contracted to help put together the Ghost Corps company logo, which was going to play before Ghostbusters 2016. They ended up going a different direction, but it was really fun to put this together. So I helped texture out the Ghost Trap and like completely retexture that, but then also design the actual Proton stream and make it fully dynamic so it would wrap around letters and have full control. But of course, you got to be really careful. You can't cross the streams. So my solution to this was to go full dynamic and make sure that they could not physically cross each other.
Oh, that's brilliant. I love that's brilliant because I didn't even think about that, but you put the amount of work into it to where like, you're totally right. They don't cross. Well done.
Yeah, that's an important detail. Although the ghosts are escaping from the trap,
it's not really
going
working
into the trap.
Yeah, it's not working the way it's supposed to here, but it's at least making a cool title and securing a company. Have you been to the Ghost Corps? Just a side note, have you been to the Ghost Corps offices?
I have not.
Very cool.
I'm still in Chicago, and almost all of that's out in LA, I imagine.
Yeah, it's on the Sony lot, and they made it look like the Hook and Ladder. Like it's the facade of the fire station and everything. It's absolutely fantastic.
Cool. Yeah, and I'm super looking forward to the new movie. The trailer looks good so far. Of course, it's been delayed by like almost 2 years now, but
yeah, it's going to be awesome. So today, hey, give me 1 second. Actually, there's just happens to be a guest in my office. Hold on 1 second, guys.
Oh.
When he says guest, I'm assuming he means child.
It's one of my children.
Ah.
So
I was expecting like a dog to jump up in your lap or something.
no, my son was standing here continuing to talk to me, and I think I needed just to flat out say, I am live on the internet right now. This is important, son. This is more important than anything.
If you want to talk to Daddy, get in the YouTube chat, and Michael will tell him what you're saying.
Yes, do that. Tell Michael, and Michael will tell me. So
Yeah, I'm sure any kids are super up on the streaming these days. They get it.
Oh yeah, so up in the streaming that he has my kids have no desire to watch anything that I like. Any of my shows.
Oh sure.
Speaking of the chat, Seth, they are wondering if this is going to be an ecto show today.
You know, funny enough, it's actually not. We can talk about. So, Chris, I don't know how much you know about this. I don't know how much you know about ecto. It's just funny to people listening. We talk about ecto every single episode, and now here I am talking to someone as if they've never heard of that. But several years ago, we did a film team experiment here at Red Giant called Busted, where we wanted to try and recreate a bunch of the effects from Ghostbusters, but with like a Iron Man kind of vibe and feel. And so we did like the kind of almost like a road pack or a road version of like what the Ghostbusters stuff had. So like the traps were like little pucks, and the proton packs were like this thing attached to his shoulder instead. And I did all of the proton streams using Trapcode DAO, and then with Trapcode Particular to do the sparks coming off of them. And out of that actually came a plugin for Universe called Ecto, which creates like smoky glows on anything with an alpha channel.
Yeah. I pulled the video up here. I'm scrolling through it right now.
Yeah, so we've used it a whole bunch on this show because it's a really nice way to get a really quick smoky glow. So that's where the question in the chat comes from. This past year, I also, and I'm just saying all this so Michael can put it all in the descriptions and in the chat as well, but I, for a presentation I did at 3D Motion Show a couple months ago, I re-approached the Proton stream effects, this time using Trapcode Particular, because Particular now has flocking simulations within it. So what you're looking at is actually just a stream of particles that are all flocking to this one target point, and with some turbulence as well. And then those same iterations of Particular are duplicated and added their own individual distortion to create the difference between the core and the streams and such.
Yeah, that looks amazing.
It came out really cool. But so your approach, of course, is going to be through Cinema 4D, I'm assuming.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So let's get started. I really want to know what you're going to do here.
Yeah, totally. So just to cover it, I'm not sure, like based on the audience of VFX and Chill, like how many people are very familiar with Cinema 4D, but we're going to do something a little bit fancy here. I'm going to get maybe a little more technical than we have to by using a little bit of Xpresso. It's not too much, but Xpresso will save us a lot of time and we can iterate more quickly if we go ahead with that. But let's start out as simple as we can. The thought here being we're going to build a dynamic series of objects all in a row, interconnect all of them, and then allow dynamics to drive their direction while they're all chained together. So to begin with, I will create a cube. We want to do this about real world scale. I like creating this figure and just basing things, just kind of eyeballing it based on that if we want to go real world. So the beam will be about that thick is what I'm aiming for. Turning that off, this can be the main cube, and I'm going to call that one lock. We'll try and stay a little extra organized as we have an audience. My own scene files, I never name anything, of course. But
Chris, I actually have a really weird question for you that I should know the answer to. You pulled up that human figure there.
Mm-hmm.
Is that human figure within the environment you're working in? Like, is there a pixel to like to metric ratio in terms of like, is that actual a life-size human being in your computer?
Yes,
it is.
If you click on the figure, you see it has a height of 180 centimeters. But if I type in 6FT and hit enter, you see 182 centimeters. It translates instantly to centimeters.
Excellent.
So this is a 6-foot human out of the box for all purposes.
Very cool. That's something I've always been curious about. All right, keep going, man. Sorry.
No, no, all good. I always work in centimeters. Well, I always, because I make tutorials for everybody, I want my Cinema 4D to look as vanilla as possible. So it's pretty much the default layout. And a lot of people will change their units to inches or feet, but I just try and keep it all as vanilla as possible. Besides, we should all be on metric anyway. So, okay, so we've got one cube, and I'm creating a second cube, just a copy of it, and that goes into a MoGraph cloner. Should I be addressing this as if people have no idea what cinema is, or
you should address it as if I have no idea what you're doing.
Okay, well, we could definitely do that. I'm going to turn off every object that we're not actively working with. So here's a cube named beam. That goes into an object called a cloner. A cloner enables you to make duplicates of an object. And I use this all the time. We really need something like this in Photoshop and Illustrator, just for the ability to replicate images and whatnot. I can make a grid of any size and space them out however I like, just make tons of them everywhere. But what we need this time is not a grid of them, but a linear line of them. I don't want them traveling up, so instead I will have them move along Z. And generally speaking, Z plus is forward in 3D, especially in cinema. I'm going to change the display mode so we can see the outlines of the object. And I can create as many of these as I like. So we are essentially setting our ratio of what is the length of the beam as compared to the width of the beam. We'll have it run quick by setting it to exactly 100 right now. We've got the original lock cube, and that one is going to be the control point. That's where that's coming out of the proton pack type of spot. So I don't want those two overlapping. So this all scoots forward exactly 5. You see there's a gap, and I'm gonna make sure boop, they're just barely touching there. All right, with that set up, we could start making these dynamic. So I will add a dynamics tag by right-clicking on the cloner. Say I would like a simulate rigid body, and make another one on the lock, and I'll say simulation collider body. That means that one doesn't move. In order to show what's happening, if I hit play right now, you'll see all the cubes just fall out of the scene. Let's turn off gravity so that doesn't happen, because the Proton stream doesn't have any gravity. It just kind of moves around where it wants to. So here's my global settings. I'll just say gravity 0. Then, so we can see something happening, under simulation, I'll add in a force and just a simple turbulence for right now. We'll give it a little bit more power. That's about half the power of normal gravity down. If I hit play, you'll just see all the individual cubes fly away in space. They will collide with each other and bounce off each other. They can't pass through, which is pretty cool out of the gate. But what we really need to do, and the challenging part here, is interlocking all of them. And there's no automatic way of doing that. So what we need to do is create a single connection. So under simulate dynamics, there's something called a connector. And there's a bunch of different type of connections. This is a hinge, so it's kind of like a rotational one where you like a door hinge type thing. But for our purposes, I think using a rag doll will be good. And turning this on, you'll see something that looks a little bit like a dog cone. And it just means that something can't move beyond the shape of that cone.
And you learned this from Peppy the Clown, correct? This is one of the powers you intuited from. Okay.
I mean, it's funny you're saying that, but like a lot of what we're doing here would be the steps I would take to build out that dynamic clown rig. But yeah.
Which is what you're doing next time you come on the show, by the way. You're going to build out the dynamic clown rig.
We should.
Seth, the chat is concerned that your head is blocking some of the settings.
Oh no!
For this episode, since a lot of Cinema 4D stuff is handy, you might want to scoot yourself.
You're absolutely right. I can't believe I didn't even think. I was like, God, look at how beautiful that man is while he was working with things. Yes, watch this. I'm just going to do this.
Excellent. We can go on bottom left. That's not as important, or we can just fade away.
Bottom left. I'm going to go bottom left. Let's see. You keep teaching. I'm just going to move myself.
Yeah, I'll scoot this up a little bit so we have some space down in the material manager. Perfect. Okay, continuing. We've got this one connector. So what do I want to do? Well, I move it forward a little bit. So I want it to be not in the middle of the first cube, but in between the two, which is exactly 2.5 over. I'll make it a child of the lock. It's a little bit large right now, so I'll scale this down to a draw size of 10. That's just in the viewport. And I would like to link this one that doesn't move to this first one that does. So I could manually say, okay, object, I want to link from the locked cube to the first beam cube. And with it's in the cloner. Let me turn the cloner off and show you. If I hit play now, that cube is stuck onto this first one. There's no gravity, so random turbulence is blowing it around. So fine start right there. In addition to that, while it can kind of move around inside this cone, I don't want it to be twisting too much. So I will turn on an additional setting of angular limit, and I want it to go anywhere from -2 degrees to +2 degrees. So just a tiny bit of rotation. Really shouldn't look like much hitting play here. Looks pretty much identical. So now we need to start stepping this through and making additional copies of it. And here's where things start getting a little bit fancy. Making a duplicate of this connector. I would like this to connect what to what? Well, I want to connect the beam to something else, but that something else doesn't exist. I can't link to it. If I turn on the cloner, it exists in the viewport, but it doesn't exist here in the object manager. So how do I connect this connector to the next one? Well, we could do it manually by making this cloner editable, which I'll do. And now you'll see that all of those have kind of exploded out and become real in the scene. And now I'd have to manually say, you connect to you, you connect to you, you connect to you, which is doable. You can totally do that.
And 100% what I would end up doing, because I do not know what you're about to do.
Yeah. And then there's if people don't want to do the Xpresso method I'm going to do, here's a good alternative. What I will do is just I'm going to delete like 95 of these. And now we've just got a couple. So if we just take a minute and interconnect a few of them. So I'll connect 0 to 1, connect 1 to 2, and actually 2 doesn't need a connection. So you see there's a couple of connections now. Nope, they're not quite happy with something I did. This is always a risk. Oh, there's a good chance. Yep, I forgot to scoot them forward before I made the cloner editable. So let me move those forward. Let me see how much I need to move forward. Looks like they need to be, 2.5 again. So I'm going to select them all and make sure they're all locally at +2.5. I think that should fix that.
If you hit render, and it looks just like this. By the way, I know these won't be visible, but this looks just like the satellite from any 90s film that featured a satellite in space. This is like a final render for the opening of Twister.
Yeah. Okay, these connections aren't terribly happy right now. So, let me double check. We got to get the step right. So limit from there to there, beam, and let's link that to the next object just to make sure. So is that in the correct spot? Visually, seemingly, yes. Moving this one forward 5 units, I would like to connect 0 to 1. Turn this one off. Oh, and make sure that they are dynamic. Okay, that... Yeah.
Whoa.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, it is working. It's totally working. I just forgot that when I make it editable, when I made the editable, the first one has to connect to this one again. So as soon as I do that, those should now be properly linked. There we go. Okay. So now you see that we've got we just got 3 of them connected. So instead of manually connecting 100 of them together, what you can do is say, okay, I've got 2 of them connected, copy, paste, and now scoot them forward the correct amount, and then take this and say, okay, yeah, I am 0 connected to the next one. And now the second 2 should already be connected. So I only had to make, I just have to turn off the last one. Come on, work. Yeah. So what you could do is instead of manually doing it, you can keep on doubling your work. So now I've got 4 of them, copy, paste, and now I would have 8. And I only have to interconnect that pair of them. And I could keep doubling and doubling.
Gosh, it's so satisfying to watch. Can you hit play again?
Let me turn this on and see if this connection works. Chance that it won't.
Look at that.
There we go. Woo!
So
wiggling
cool.
around. And yeah, that's all just driven through this random turbulence. We give it a little bit of scale and it just goes super crazy. So that's the manual process. We could copy again and again and again. But for any people who are familiar with cinema, let's try and make something a bit fancier. Delete this and let's make an Xpresso rig to help us do this. Oh, and I'm going to actually hit undo a bunch of times to get my cloner back, which is probably quite a few undos.
Chris, pretend I'm just a boring old idiot from the local town. What is Xpresso?
Xpresso is, and I'm going to pop it open right now, I'll do it from scratch. Let's make a null, and I'll put my cloner into said null. On the null, that's an empty folder, I can right click, and under our programming tags, we can open Xpresso. What Xpresso is a node-based visual programming language. And this has been in Cinema since version 8, which probably means this is from the year 2002 they've had this. I know nodes are all the rage these days, but Cinema had this like 17, 18 years ago. So anyway, so we're going to use this to start interlinking our objects in a more dynamic way. So here's the thought.
For the After Effects audience, this is like expressions in After Effects, but much, much more visual. You can actually see how things are connected, and you don't actually have to type code. You just make the code happen.
What
by
many
linking
believe
nodes
After
together.
Effects should look like. Those
I
who have graduated beyond After Effects believe that this is the superior way to composite is through nodes.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely, I don't do a lot of compositing, but I see the appeal for sure. So like I said, we're going to build this very dynamically. I actually don't need that null. What I'm going to do is we're going to use very few nodes, but they're very powerful nodes. Searching for the word hierarchy, let's grab a hierarchy node. And that hierarchy needs a start point, and it already linked to this null. So that's our start point in the hierarchy. And then we needed to do some sort of action. And the idea here is we're going to use this visual programming language to enable ourselves to make this editable, and then it will automatically find the parts and interconnect them correctly. So that's what we're going to be building out here.
Oh, wow.
So now that I've made this editable, we need to tell it what are the steps it's going to do. Well, this is outputting a hierarchy of objects, a series of objects. And for that repetition, it is currently saying it's going to go down and then repeat by going next, 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 next. That's what this is saying. And so once I make this editable, you'll see that we want to go down, down, and then I suppose even, yeah, down, down, and then next, next, next. So trying to keep it simple, let's say D, D, for down, down, and then it repeats going next. So it's going to essentially, this is eventually going to return a list of objects of beam 0, beam 1, beam 2. That's what it's returning. But I should probably hit undo and make sure I'm making these changes while
I don't fully understand that. Should I? Down, down, next, next?
Okay, so yeah, I'll do it again because this is actually pretty important and this hierarchy node is really powerful. So I have said we are starting on the null. So that's our start point. And then there is a start path parameter. So where does it begin the process? And I'm going to say, and once again, we have to imagine that this is editable because that's what we will be doing. Mm-hmm. So starting with a null, how do we get to beam 0? Well, we go down in the hierarchy and we go down in the hierarchy. So that is what start path is, down, down. And then after it's completed that the first time, it's now going to do the iteration path. And that's going to repeat again and again and again. So that means if we are currently on beam 0 and I say, what is next? Well, the connector isn't next. The connector is down because it's a child of beam. So the next object is beam 1. So as it repeats, it's going to say beam 0, 1, 2, 3. So that is what it's repeatedly outputting.
Down goes down in the hierarchy and toward the child. Down goes to the children and next goes to the peer. Okay.
Exactly. And there's also up and previous. But we're not
now, David Fairchild in the chat says that you've got it wrong and it should be up, up, down, down, left, right, BA, start.
I'll try it, but I'm not sure.
I get that reference.
Okay, I'm going to hit undo again to get back to our original setup. And we now know that this is doing the correct path down. So once that happens, you know what is going to make this a lot easier? I'm going to make a duplicate of this. So we have one to reference, but then one that we're actually going to be activating this on. So this is now going to be outputting that beam. But what do I want it to do at that point? Well, we're going to, again, I'm going to pull up a reference node. The reference node is really powerful. It's like a simpler version of the hierarchy node. So if this is now, in theory, outputting beam 0, and I'm going to say, yes, you are outputting beam 0. I'm going to say, well, what do I want to do? I want to go down again. I want to go to its child. So I'll just put another down in here. And what is that going to be doing? Well, it's going to now be returning this connector. So what we need is I'm going to put a duplicate connector. So here's an empty one. And I'm just going to turn it off. I'm going to call it dummy. So that's our dummy connector. It doesn't do anything. It's almost like an empty instance now because I'm dragging that directly into Xpresso, which is pretty cool that you can just drag things directly. And it is now going to become whatever is output. So essentially, this is now representational of that connector. And then it'll repeat and go to the next one and repeat and go to the next one. So that's what this is a representation of all of them. So what do I want to control in all of them? Well, I want to control the object B, the second object. So that can get dragged directly as an input. And it's all of these are already referencing themselves. So I don't have to worry about object A. what object should it be linking to? Well, we could do the same reference idea, making another duplicate of that one. Where do we start? This is outputting, and that is outputting beam 0. So when it's doing this particular iteration, I want to go to the next one. So this will just be N for next. That's now outputting whatever the next object is. That's the theory. And for the most part, that should be all that we need to do. So let's see if it worked. I'm going to delete the fake one, and here's our real one. And keep in mind, if now you see beam connecting to itself and then an empty one. Once I make this editable, though, hopefully some objects exist for that to go reference. So yeah, now if I click on connector, it is Xpresso has now run. It runs every single refresh and it says, hey, you connect to the next one, connect to the next one. And as I select each one, you see 2 is instantly connected to 3. 3 is connected to 4. And that goes all the way down the line, and it's done it 100 times.
Wow.
So
wait, did you specify at a certain place to stop at 100?
No, well, yes. Let me hit undo. It's not in the Xpresso. It is actually in the cloner. So let me close that. We don't need it right now. And
forgive me if I missed
100
it. I
clones.
see, count.
Yeah,
right there.
So yeah, the count. So we can just set this to anything we want, and that's one of the reasons why we built it this way, is because we can start out with a simple beam of 100, and then the client comes back and the client says, you know what, the beam has to be longer. It has to be more detailed. Then, that's where that comes in. You want to make this dynamic, but your ability to go back and change it later on.
Oh, it's like incredibly easier. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's really fun. Now you already liked the way it looked when it started twisting around. I'm going to do this wrong before we do it right. I'm going to make that editable.
Perfect.
And
that's
now
the way
we've
I
got,
know.
Yeah, we've got 100 of these instantly connected. If I hit play, all the same forces are still running, but it looks pretty crazy. Back. Yeah. So what's going wrong here? Well, it's not staying locked on the original one, but it is locked on the end. So let's think about that. What is happening is, by making it editable, it's kind of like I killed off that original one and it's been replaced by, what's literally a clone. So we need that to relink to the start one. But in addition to that, we also have the very end of the chain. And the end of the chain, there isn't a next one to connect to. So it's connected to nothing. So that locks it in place and it can't go anywhere. So if I were to turn that end one off, then this is now not connected to anything, and the entire thing can float away and do whatever it wants. So that's how we will eventually unlock that last one. And we could manually, I'll do it, why not? Let's keep that last one off.
Will you actually leave that last one on to be able to control its target endpoint later? Or I guess I'll let you get to that part.
You could, that's definitely an option, but we will not have to.
Cool.
But so right now we could, every time we make that editable, we could manually say, okay, connector, you go ahead and manually relink to number 0. And now that has reconnected, and that is not too much effort. You see it's now connected at the beginning. So, that wouldn't be so bad to do. But if we were so inclined, we could do a little, let me hit undo and get our hierarchy back again, or before I made it editable. Mm-hmm. And inside of Xpresso, let's just tell Xpresso to automatically do that step for us. So in this case, I will say that this connector, what's the best way to do this? Yeah, this connector, we should have it be in some relationship to this one. So by dragging in, let me do this as easy. Oops, don't delete that. Delete the node. There's a lot of ways of doing this. I'm just trying to do it in the simplest way, the cleanest way, maybe. So that lock, if we'd have to remember, here's the important thing. If I do it the way I'm about to, you'd have to remember that the lock always has to come right before the null. If you move it, it'll break. So let's just keep that in mind. If we want it to be cleaner, and maybe we do, I'll put those into a group, selecting both objects. I can hold Alt and hit G. Those have now become grouped together. And that just means it's more likely that those two will hang out near each other. Okay, so I want this connector. So I'll drag that in as the final thing that happens. What do I want to have happen? Well, I want to eventually control object B. What does it get connected to? Now it needs to automatically find the proper link in the next one. So it's also going to be my start point. So that will output itself as an object. And then we need a reference node. So I can duplicate that again and feed it in. And now temporarily, I'll make that hierarchy editable. And what's the relationship here? Well, it's starting on itself. So it needs to go up, next, down, down. So that's our steps. And I'm going to forget, but let's just say up, next, down, down. Because, yeah, exactly. I'll repeat it. Up to the block, down, down, down. Oh, wait, I did it wrong. This is up, next, down, down. Yeah, up, next, down, down. Okay, so I'm going to copy that because I have to undo and get my cloner back. And now I can paste that back in. Okay, that's the relationship. That's what it wants to get connected to. Hopefully that works. So we should find out really easily. Let's even clear that out. If I say clear, it's actually relinking to that beam already. But if I make this editable, now there's beam 0. If I click on that connector, it is now linked to beam 0. So instead of us having to manually do it every time, it's doing it for us. Excellent. This is just a way of automating steps. So we don't need to worry about that too much. This would actually be a really good stage to save it. So I will just do a little quick save. Okay, important detail that we're about to move forward from. Once we make this editable, there's no way for it to go back to not being editable. We could make a duplicate of it. We could keep on working. You could save it in a separate file and copy it back in again. But once you make it editable, there's not like a instant return state to it.
If only there was some way to recall things, Chris.
Yeah, I'm so reluctant always to like talk about my own plugins. But as a quick aside, then this wasn't prepared, so thanks for that setup. I do have another plugin that we sell at my company, Rocket Lasso, and it's called Recall. So if I right click on any object, but I'll specifically do it on this null and say recall, it is a tag. And if I double click on that tag, you see the icon fills in, and that means it's now stored this entire hierarchy with all of the information in its current state. So if I can show you, I could go and make this cloner editable, and we can expand that, and I could start renaming things. I could delete things, and I could super mess it up. And you do a million things in your scene file, and then later you're like, oh, dang it, I have to go back and change the total count here. And if I hit play, it's going to look pretty wacky. Those are going to start floating and be broken. But instead of hitting undo, now I can just click on my recall tag, double click, and it comes back to the exact state that it used to be in, and everything relinks back. So
that's rad.
Yeah. So yeah, that's my little tool recall.
It's called Recall, and they can get it at RocketLasso.com. Yep. Just throw your money at Chris. This isn't actually a television show, an internet show. This is a hold up. Take your money, hand all your money to Chris right now, please.
Do you know what's actually really funny is even though Recall does a lot of different things, it's super useful. I mean, this whole info page and all that, but I literally wanted to make this plugin because of this exact type of problem of building a chain of objects, but being able to bring it back again if you need to make changes. But in any case, that's stored. Let's start moving forward. And I think we can move forward pretty confidently with our current setup, making that editable. The one thing we will have to do is just turn off that last one. I think that's pretty easy to do, so we won't worry about coding that in. But if I hit play now, we should have our entire joint chain. They're all wiggling around, doing their thing. Okay, let's start making this interesting. Let's start turning this into, instead of a dynamic chain of cubes, let's start turning into an actual proton stream. So right now, it's driven by turbulence. It has no scale. If I start scaling this up, you can imagine this like a giant fractal noise.
Woo,
so now that I've made it larger, it actually has it's like a cloud of noise. So like the different noise is animating around, and the noise will push up or push down or push in or push out. So that's what you're seeing. And if I make it really huge, you'll see that the noise is really kind of large and subtle. If you go really tiny, it's like very individualized. Like each cube is more doing its own thing. Yeah. So we can actually start using these to our advantage. But let's not do it with turbulence. Turbulence is great and everything. But in newer versions of Cinema, and for like the last 3 versions, we've got something amazing, and that is field forces. So
field forces. I didn't make the drop. I'll make it for next time you're on. We'll drop a big animation that'll be like animated soldiers running at you. It'll be great.
That's actually pretty good. And I mean, it is one of the best things that's been added in Cinema. It's so powerful. So under simulation, for a long time, we had things like a tractor and wind and friction, but there's like a master one now that there's no reason to almost use any of these other ones because we have field force.
And all of these were nicknames that you had in high school, correct, Chris? Attractor, defector.
Yeah, deflector. What else we got? Friction, gravity. Definitely. Yeah. So what do we got? We got field force. And what this is, imagine like it's a giant cloud of some sort of direction somewhere. So just to show, what's the best way to do it? I'll keep it simple. I'm going to click a solid, and a solid is just a vector. It's a direction in space. So this is like X, Y, Z. So keep it simple. This is just saying point straight up. That's what it's saying. So there's a force saying point straight up, and you can see all these green lines aiming upward representing that. Now, if I hit play, we'll see the entire line start trying to travel upward because that's what we fed into it. Now I could change it to the opposite. We say -1, and now suddenly everything's getting pulled down. We can
Is
pull
1 the
forward or
maximum
backward.
number in this?
No, we can, any number, and you'll see that these lines stretch, and now it's 100 times as powerful. So if I play, you see it get yanked apart.
That's
It's
strength. I
pulling
see.
so hard it breaks the chain because it pulls that.
It's strength.
much.
It's not direct. Never mind. I'm figuring it out loud, which is what this show is for. Sorry, continue.
Totally. No, this is great. I love talking. This is not intro content, but I love talking to people and showing them these things like for the first time. It's like my favorite thing to demo at like a trade show and whatnot. So let's give ourselves a goal here. We'll keep it simple to start out with. I'll just make a sphere. The sphere is what we want to go to. That's our ghost right now. I'll hit T for scale it down a bit. And that's what we want to collide with. I want to be dynamic, so right-clicking on it.
I want to collide with you, Ghost.
Simulation.
Coming for you.
Collider body. Which is what's too bad is there is a collider. There's a tag called Ghost Body, but that's not what we're using. That would make it
what
actually
the hell does
turn
it exist
invisible.
for?
Yeah, it's just like a collider body, but it's invisible. But yeah, sadly not appropriate for what we're doing here.
Screw you, Ghost Body. We got this sphere.
So currently we said everything should, right now it's pushing up. And in fact, if I hit play, you'll see the sphere stays static, but we will collide with it.
Whoa!
It's just by coincidence that we're colliding with it. We just happen to be going up and it's in our path. But let's say that we actually want to head towards the sphere. Inside of the field force, instead of using a solid, I will use a spherical field. And you'll see as I create it, we get these nice little dots indicating a direction. And if I want to, maybe we can visualize that pretty well. I'm going to say I want to see a lot of dots, and I want fewer X, Y, Z. On X, I'll put 0. So now I've got a 2-dimensional grid. That's a visual representation of the direction that things are traveling. And I'll make it larger. Let's say 1,000 by 1,000.
Changing the dimension didn't change the field itself. It just changed the visualization of it?
Yes, this is a preview, kind of being like, oh, this represents where the directions might be going.
Okay.
So along these lines, the spherical field, if I start moving around, you see that everything is aiming towards the center of that spherical field. So here's the plan. Let's put that spherical field as a child of the sphere. I'm going to click a
Child
0
of
out
the
button.
sphere. Rated R.
Reset transform. Yeah, reset transform. That's going to pop it right onto the sphere. And right now, you see it slowly loses power as it falls off. And it's not, well, it's a big sphere, but it's not that big. So let's make it like huge. I'm going to add a couple extra zeros. So boom, boom, boom. Huge sphere, like for all purposes, infinite now. And under remapping, I'm going to say, actually, you know what? Before I scale it up, here's in remapping, here is the fall off. And you see here's an inner fall off where it's full power inside that circle. And outside that circle, it's 0. I'm going to say, you know what? I want full power all the way through. And now that's full power all the way through. I'm going to say, also, you're super huge. So essentially,
0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0.
Yeah, I'm liberal with typing in the giant numbers. So that's a spherical field with equal power, but no matter where you are, it's saying pull towards this center point. So only having
Like
done
me.
that.
That's what.
Well, yeah, that's, I mean, sheer attraction right there. What else are you going to do?
It's attraction and effector. That's going to be like a buddy cop film starring you and me. I don't know. We'll swap roles. Anyway, continue.
Hitting play now, the only force affecting anything is this attraction towards the center of the sphere. So hitting play, you now see that they're not just going up, they're going towards the sphere. I'll give ourselves some more time. So I'm going to type in 999, give ourselves a bunch more frames. And now you see everything is pulling slowly, but surely.
Oh, that's so cool. God, that's genius,
sphere.
Chris.
And this is a nice clean setup. And like, I don't know if we're going
Look
to post
at
it,
that!
but I have a link to my old tutorial, and this didn't exist back then. So we had to use a completely different method. The old method was putting a individual wind on every individual cube and saying, aim towards the sphere. But now we can do it with a single object. And it's saying, yeah, pull towards it. So that's pulling towards it. It's working really well. But we need to give these some extra characteristics. It's just everything right now blindly is going towards that direction. Well, first of all, let's make it pull quicker. So if we type this strength up to 40, that's like literally gravity power pulling towards it. So it's going to be really strong. You see all those lines and go quicker. But now if I play, you see, gets sucked to it really quick. But I want there to be, I want it to look more controlled. So under our dynamics tag, which is automatically filtering down to all those cube children, selecting selecting, I can go to, well, we got a lot of different settings in here, but under forces, a good one for us right now would be adding some drag. It's like some aerodynamics where there's actual resistance for it moving through the air. So if I push this up, a little bit goes a long way. So I'm going to type in 20. And with any luck, 20 is not, I'm going to go overboard so we can see the effect. At 80, it's going to start feeling more like it's moving through water or something like that.
Oh, nice.
Instead of air.
Can you might be planning to do this, but could you add a wiggle to that sphere and have it fly around a little bit and see this proton stream chase it?
Yeah, totally. I'm going to lower the drag to 20, which I think it's draining some of the energy out. So it's not going super crazy. And now I'll do what you just asked, which is right click on the sphere, animation, and there's a vibrate tag. And I can just say, hey, I want you to have some random position. We'll just say 555, 555.
Wow, I'm glad I just learned about the vibrate tag. I didn't even know that existed.
Yeah. So right now
now this is just like a trippy like animation from Star Trek 1. This is incredible.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So I'm gonna lower that a bit, and now it's going way too fast. So speed 0.2. There we go. A little more reasonable. So now the sphere will be moving around. Might get closer, might go further. It's completely random, so I don't know where that will go. And you can change the seed to get like a completely different, random movement coming out of it. And it's not gonna have any effect in this, but we could also give it a random rotation and have that spin around randomly. Okay, so now that is attracted to the sphere, and the sphere is constantly moving.
We're all attracted to the sphere.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Seriously, it's
I mean, Nick Campbell started that.
It's so cool. Also, Stu Mashwitz in the chat, I noticed, I know this is your job, Michael, but I just noticed he said Dead Man's Chest vibes, which I assume is not, he's saying vibes of Dead Man's Chest, not chest vibes of a dead man.
Well, I think what he's referring to specifically is the
Davy Jones tentacles.
Davy Jones, which is the greatest thing ever.
Absolutely the greatest thing ever. 100% agree.
I was back in the day, I don't know if you guys were on what used to be called CG Talk, or now CG Society. And it was, pre-Slack or any of that stuff, pre-Discord. Everybody was on forums all the time. And that was my favorite forum. And there was one time, right when that movie came out, that a whole bunch of the ILM animators, somebody started a thread about it. And everybody was like, oh, like, obviously the tentacles are CG, but the rest of it's a real guy.
I know.
And then they started, and then somebody's like, no, the whole thing's CG. And everybody's like, no, it's not. Like, those eyes are not CG.
Yeah.
And then a bunch of animators from ILM started showing up in the thread, and essentially they were getting to talk about their work. And it was like one of the greatest things ever. And I was already obsessed with it.
Well, that was crazy because even the eyes, the fact that the eyes were, because I know in the previous Pirates, a big deal that sold the effects in the first Pirates was that they kept the actors' eyes.
Yeah,
they
exactly.
Replaced everything but kept the eyes, and it made it so real. And this one, everything was fake. It was incredible.
Yeah.
All right.
But you were convinced that the rest of it was real.
Yeah.
That's what it was, so grounded. I was like, well, obviously it's a real guy. He's probably wearing a prosthetic crab claw. But nope.
Oh man, Hashi's out there. Hey Hash, we're gonna do a Pirates episode. We haven't talked about this publicly, but Hashi and I are planning. And Chris, you are welcome to come back any one of these weeks you want to. We'd love to have your expertise on it. We're gonna start doing some flashback episodes, which I'm sharing this so that people in the chat will share like any movies they would love to see us talk about. We're gonna do a Forrest Gump episode. We're gonna do a Twister episode. We're gonna do a Roger Rabbit episode, and now we're gonna do a Pirates of the Caribbean Dead Man's Chest episode. And we're gonna have Chris come out and build us some tentacle beards.
Yes. You know what? By the time we're done here, you will already be 90% of the way to one tentacle, and you would just have to make copies.
I'm constantly 90% of the way to one tentacle. That's my wake up state. All right, back to the child of the sphere and the cube children.
Okay, let's keep this going. Now, this is going directly towards the sphere. Let's start changing the properties of this line a little bit. First of all, dynamically speaking, these are being calculated automatically. But I'm gonna say yes, calculate them as cubes. If you wanted to, you could make it run even quicker. If we said, even though they look like cubes, we could say treat them as if they are a sphere, and I turn that on, and that will calculate quicker, but they'll interact a little bit differently. So it's your own choice there. You see they roll a little bit more freely if you do that. But I'll go back to cube. And now that is done, let's start. I'm going to turn off the friction. So right now you see it's hitting the sphere and they really kind of grip onto it. And if you want, now it's gripping on, it feels like it's stuck there. But I'm going to say you have zero friction. So now they freely slide on the surface, and the proton beam definitely
sexy,
like feels a little bit more like it slides around. Okay, now that's happened, let's push this even further.
This is very sensual to watch. I'm not going to lie.
It's going to get worse or better.
It's like trying to massage that sphere, and that sphere is like, no, stop it. This is not a consensual event happening here.
It's not going away too far.
No, you're right. It's not fighting it.
Okay, so let's. I want to simplify a little bit and talk about the next force that we're going to be using. So I'm going to copy that, open a new file, paste in this cube. Oh, it didn't bring the dynamics. I got to copy the. I'm going to copy the tag on there. copy that, undo, new file, paste. Okay, just a single cube in a new scene. Throwing that into a cloner, and we'll make not too many. Let's do 9 by 9 and make them, let's say 15 apart. Okay, now you see I got this whole grid of them. Turning off gravity.
Of the cubes versus Child of the Sphere.
Oh, and you can go nuts. Cinema gets crazy on this because we could make like a lot of these. If I say multi-instance, especially, it could be like, what?
Oh my God!
But
this
we're
empire
gonna keep it. Yeah, Palpatine is jealous. So
you need one sphere up in front, like preaching to it, and this is so good.
Okay, so I just turned all the gravity off, but these are still dynamic. So if nothing is happening, there's no gravity, and I hit play, you'll see that nothing happens. I will give us a few more frames. 999. Okay, here's a really cool force object inside of, speaking of Palpatine, force object inside of cinema that I ignored for way too long, and it's so amazing. And it's called the force object. Creating force. It does one thing, essentially, and it does it really well. It will make objects pull towards each other or push apart from each other. So instead of going to a point, it's how they interact with each other. So by default, if I play, it's probably gonna be really subtle, but you see they slowly start pulling in just a little bit. So let's crank up the power. Let's go up to like 100 and instantly see all of them get pulled right in, and they'll even collapse into like a ball eventually, which is great. But we can also do the opposite and say negative. So now they fly apart. So, and there's an inner and outer distance for that. So,
and it's all relative based on each other, not on a point.
Exactly. Yeah. This is, you see how they're pushing apart. Yeah. Relative to each other. And if, right now, actually, there's drag on there. So you see, as soon as they get the proper distance away, they start losing their energy and slowing down as their energy gets drained out because there's an inner and outer distance. So if we made those really small, if I made this like 5 and 15, they're not even in range of that, so nothing happens. And as we begin adding that in, they will slowly, they do fall asleep. So, okay. Yeah. So you see they slowly push apart. So that's the concept. So now that you kind of see what that does as far as individual cubes are concerned, let's go back into our main file and create that again. Simulation, dynamics, force. And what do we want this to do? Well, the beam shouldn't cross over itself. Now, right now, it kind of isn't anyway. When you see the final line, it won't. But let's stop these from getting too close to each other. So again, I'm going to put a pretty strong force in there, -111, and we'll leave everything default and start tweaking after that. But hitting play, you still see it's still getting pulled towards the sphere, but let's check it out. Look, it didn't all clump up in one spot this time. Do you see how it's like avoiding itself? Yeah. Now, we got to start like, there's a lot of push and pulling here. We're just making this up as we go. So let's make everything get pulled to the sphere like way stronger. So let's crank the power of that up to, I don't even know, let's say 200. So 4 times as powerful. That's starting to get in the way visually. So I'm going to...
That right there is the coolest looking thing.
Yeah, there's a little cross section of direction. It goes a long way. Temporarily, though, that's going to be turned off. So we just focus on that. It's 4 times as powerful.
Disco sci-fi. Back in the 70s when all sci-fi looked like a disco club. It's so cool.
So the primary force now is it pulling directly towards itself. But you can see that these aren't clumping up nearly as much. But we got to just keep tweaking the numbers here. So we got a couple of important ones. We got the distance. And right now, this is a pretty large distance. So I'm going to lower that down. Remember, each cube is only 5. So I'll give it a distance of 10 for the inner. And we'll do an outer distance of, I'm just going to say 100. So 10 times its distance. It's got an inverse square. So it falls off very quickly. So let's make this 10 times as strong. A strength of... like over 1,000, negative 1,000. But now instantly you see that we start getting these nice smoother curves as it begins to wrap around everywhere. And yeah, it really just turns into a combination of what the distances are and what the strength is on the entire overall object. Yeah, if I keep up, there we go. If I increase it just enough, they're really fighting each other.
That's
and they don't want to get that near.
Then it's not caressing it. It's like it's trapping it the way the ghosts are always trapped with that. There's air between the streams and the ghost.
Exactly.
Chris, from the chat, they're asking how this force differs from the push apart effector.
Okay, yeah, we can totally talk about that. So I'll go back to the scene file. So visually, what you see right here is going, if I play, you see they push apart from each other, and it feels a lot like the push apart effector. And if you don't know what that is, I'm going to turn off the force, and it's not dynamic anymore. And as an effector, there's all these different effectors. And these mean it's going to look at each individual clone and do something to it. So if I were to make a random effector, I can randomly move the positions. So there's no dynamics there. It's just changing positions. So a different effector that we have is called... Where is it? It's here somewhere. plane. I almost never use it. Oh, there it is. I'm blind. Okay, push apart effector. So it does something very similar to what we just saw with dynamics. If I start increasing the radius, you'll see that they're going to start trying to push apart each other, almost identical. It's going to look a little bit, you see there's a little bit of choppiness where it kind of like wiggles and pops a little bit. Yeah. And as I keep on increasing, it'll keep on spreading out. So visually very similar, but this is not dynamic in any way. If I were to put a, okay, I'll just make a cube, put it over here and make it dynamic. So rigging, simulation, rather, dynamic body. That's something to collide with. So if I hit play on this, and so this is now playing, and I say, yes, keep pushing apart, pushing apart, pushing apart. And, oh, maybe you can't push apart while, oh, it's because they're dynamic. Let me turn off dynamics for a moment. Okay, so no dynamics. Push apart, reset to 5. Okay, so even if I hit play, if I start increasing this radius, those will just pass right through the cube. They don't care. The cube doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that they're dynamic. Now, if we get rid of push apart, and instead I just say, okay, this is actually all about those forces and dynamic object, then it's not a mathematical calculation that, how do I explain this? It's a very technical thing that's going on. With the push apart, it's detecting everything within a distance and saying, hey, push apart from me. But with dynamics, it's looking at another one. It's more like, oh, I'm blowing a wind on you. Here's a wind coming from the direction of me. So push away from me. And with that being dynamic, if I hit play now, then these will, if it's strong enough, it should go, I'll make it stronger. Boop. It's going to push that wind, and then boop, you see those start colliding with the cube, and they can't get past it now because they are fully dynamic. And like a push apart doesn't have an attraction either. And the cubes, even if it did, they would just pass right through each other. But this is our fully dynamic method.
Very nice.
Okie dokie.
Excellent answer.
To Proton stream. Good question. Okay, so where are we? Well, we have it going and wrapping around, and if we put the strength really high, we saw that they kind of push apart. It's like, even though this does look good for our proton beam, it's actually not what I want to have happen exactly. I don't want pushing away from the surface, because that's not pushing away because of the sphere. It's pushing apart because it's pushing apart from its neighbors really strongly, like the other links in the chain. So I actually don't want that to happen. So let's get back here, sphere. Okay, so that is wrapping around nicely. Let's start getting a little motion going on there. So turning back on the field force visual, we've got all this crazy explosion. I will say don't display the vector length. So now it doesn't show the power, it just shows the direction. All right.
But it still has the power. It's still got the power.
The power. Yep. If we add in, so currently it's just that spherical field attracting it to a particular spot, but we can start layering up additional field objects. So adding in a random field. The random field is now, let me show you. It is layering up on top somehow. I'm going to turn it on. It's its only thing. Now it's set to normal. And you see that there is now a random direction everywhere. It is, again, imagine a big cloud of noise. And that cloud of noise right now is really small. So we don't really see any uniformity. If I start cranking up the scale of this slowly as I go, there, you see a pattern suddenly go from randomness to, we can now feel a bit of a pattern in there. So now we actually have a size of noise. And I always like to scale something up until it's like, okay, we can see the noise. And now you could make an intelligent decision of like, I want it to be half of that amount. But if you're in that world of being really tiny, you don't know if you're several orders of magnitude too small from what you want to be.
That's fascinating, because I would expect to scale down and find the patterns, but it's interesting that you scaling up found the patterns. And
even different render engines will treat it. Sometimes smaller means bigger, and sometimes bigger means bigger. In this case, I like bigger meaning bigger, like the cloud gets bigger, so we see the cloud represented. But it's the opposite in a lot of software. But yeah, so now there's a random noise. And
I would like to point out, it's not tiling, it's just that you're able to see more of a distinct pattern.
Yes, so, exactly. Let me show you.
Because when it's smaller, it just looks like static because the differences are so close to each other. When you get it bigger.
Yes. Exactly. Yeah. If I go really big, you can start seeing like very clean
Hey, Michael, is Ant-Man in the comments? I'm seeing a Scott Lang, and that's Ant-Man, right? And the public knows he's Ant-Man?
Yep.
This is Ant-Man with an E, so it's more like Anti-Man.
Oh, Anti-Man. Okay. Let me know when Aunt-Man shows up. I would love to meet her. All right. Sorry, Chris. My job is to derail you. Your job is to work, and my job is to stop you at all costs.
You're doing an excellent job of it.
Thank you.
But anyway, yeah, this is a big noise pattern, just like you might see if you did like what's it called in like After Effects and Photoshop, like just a fractal noise.
Well, clouds in Photoshop and it's a piece of crap. Fractal noise in After Effects, which is wonderful.
Yeah. But you can imagine that type of thing. And we have a lot of different types of noise in cinema. Like look at this giant list of them. And you can't see it in that drop down, but if I were to make a material and load in a noise, then you get this really nifty, it's gonna be kind of tiny on the screen, and let me make sure it's above our heads. But these are all different noise patterns in there, and these are mathematical noises that exist in 3-dimensional space. But not only that, those noises can be animated, just like in After Effects. So let's give this an animation speed. And I kind of want to not see it dynamic, but I'll just let it go. Right now, I'm just looking at the pattern. If I hit play, because I added some animation speed, you see the pattern slowly changing over time. And now we can see that represented in the beam here in our Proton stream as it's moving around this constantly shifting cloud of noise. So that gives us some nice random direction. Back into the field force, let's combine that with our spherical field. So let's say that adds on top of it and then turn the spherical field back on again. So now it gets attracted to the sphere, but it also has randomness pushing it in different directions. Those combine on top of each other. So that's whipping around a lot. I think I want to slow down even more. So let's do a little more. And there's a lot of, at this point, we're going to be doing a lot of push and pull, like a little more force, a little less gravity, that type of thing.
So it's so funny to me. The second it grabs its target, it's like, you're mine now, and just rubbing it.
I mean, that's what the Proton streams do.
I know. I never looked at it with Seth through such, through
those
sensual
eyes,
perspective. Yeah.
Well, when the ghost is like struggling to get out, you don't get that vibe, but
yeah, it's true.
Here you do. So yeah, well, I'm actually going to stop it from wiggling right now because it's a slightly, it's stopping me from knowing how well the noise is letting this wrap around. So let's do that again. Okay, so now we can see this wiggling around, doing its thing. Let's tweak the forces a bit. What I'm thinking, it's really strong right now. It's got an inner distance. I want to shrink the distance overall. Maybe even shrink that one. But dude, how strong can we make this? Yeah, something like that. So what I did is I made the invisible force really small and tighter on each cube, but made it really strong in that. So if it gets close to another part of itself, it's going to push that part away.
That's smart, because that's the movement of the they'll just like change directions all of a sudden.
Yes.
In the original result.
And this is, so they're pushing each other away, but our motion is now driven primarily through this random field. So we could speed this up. So let me go 4 times as fast, and now you can see a different wiggle. We could also shrink the scale. Right now we got that pretty large scale. So we could go like way bigger. So I'm going to crank that up. And now there'll be more uniformity. You can feel like all shift left, all shift right when that's doing that. But if I start shrinking it, then we're going to start getting that more individual vibe. So as I do this, like now you see this tinier wiggles happening there. So to me, this is all about finding that balance in between. And something that's cool is we could layer it up several times. I could make a duplicate of that random field, one of them named large, and the other I'll just name small to stay organized. So with that field force, I'll make sure to add in the large as well. So say both of them should add in. So the small one, I do want to be extra tiny. And then the large one, let's put that back up to like the 900 range. And both of those are doing their effect at the same time. So we got a large effect and a small effect. Hit play, and let's see what that does for us. It's a little chaotic. So here's what's cool. I can just start pulling back on the power of those individually. Like, what's the ratio I want? And maybe we start large. Like, here's no force at all. That's just it naturally having its own motion. And now let's add in a little bit of the large, maybe a little more. Okay, I kind of dig that. And now start sneaking in some of the small for a little bit of chaos in the individual ones. So it's, these are forces pushing and pulling on each other, but achieving this effect in the end. So yeah, that's the basics of getting the beam behaving the way we want it to. But there's a few more steps that we can do. First of all, like this is just a representation of the beam. That's a series of, it's like a chain. It's a, imagine a real life chain of links going. We just happen to make them linked cubes. So with all of those connected, what do we want to do? Well, we could make the chain longer. So let's try and bring that back again. Hopefully I don't want to lose my dynamics. So I will temporarily drag a copy of it, and let's recall and then make this have 200 in length. And with 200, let us again, let's again make that editable. And then I will copy my newer dynamics tag on there because that's the one thing I didn't want to lose. And I go all the way to the end. And now you see we have 200. Turn that last one off. And with any luck, I can hit play. And there we go. Instantly continues working. So recall brought it back. And now we're able to feed it back in again. And now instantly, we've got more cubes, more layered up, ready to go. That, of course, this would be a longer beam. So presumably, are you still there? I haven't heard you in a while.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. No.
Okay, just making sure. I thought I dropped.
No, that's so cool.
Let's make the sphere just a bit bigger.
Oh my gosh.
We made the beam bigger. And now you see it's wrapping around the, and you can see how we just increased the resolution of it. It feels a little bit,
yeah.
I know, it's just a different vibe. There's more detail in it now as it wraps around, which is lovely. I love that. And keep in mind, there's a lot of options we have. If I go and once again, I don't want to lose my dynamics. So recall again, and let's again say 200, but this is just, I'm making this up as we go. If I were to grab these cubes and say, you know what, like, yes, that length is correct, but I would like to have them be 10 by 10. Oop, 10 that is. Hello. Okay, you see I've just made them like twice as tall and wide. So that's going to keep it that far away from the surface and that far away from its neighbor. So without changing anything else, that can become made editable, replace the dynamics tag again. And now we've got a very similar beam, but it's twice as thick. So it's going to stay twice as far away from the surface. Ooh, I forgot to turn off the end one. Down, 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 down. See, that's why you program that in, so you don't have to do this every time. So there we go. Now we let those all fly and wrap around, and they're twice as far away from the surface.
That's so cool. Ah!
Yeah, so very pleased with that. Okay, what's the next step here?
The chat is also enjoying this, Chris.
Excellent. Well, that's good to hear.
There's
I mean, I love
vibes.
this type of thing. And I've talked about this type of thing in the past, but with field forces, this is so much easier. We used to have to do so many different things in the past to
Speaking
do
of
what we got
ways
here.
to make things easier, there is a Cineversity plugin called Dynamic Connections that makes that Xpresso setup that you did less necessary.
Sure. Oh, yeah. You probably have to have a Cineversity subscription to get that.
If you have a Maxon subscription, you can get it. Yeah. Or if you purchase a perpetual license of Maxon, you can contact them and they tend to give you a bit of a Cineversity subscription for it. So I'd grab that if I were you.
Yeah.
Well, not you, but you chat people.
Exactly. But yeah, totally. Okay, so we've now got a series of cubes going, but that's not exactly a beam. So how do we turn this into a beam? Well, we can use another one of my favorite objects in cinema. And it's been here for a while. And it's my favorite theme of the year, which is a spline. We're going to use a tracer object. A tracer object does a lot of different things. To show you, for anybody who doesn't know, we'll start out with the tracer on the sphere. And I'm going to tell the sphere to wiggle again. We're going to hide sphere. I turned everything else off, but now the sphere, I'm going to say, hey, you should wiggle.
Okay,
but there's
Chris.
a tracer. There's a tracer object on it now, and you see it's tracing lines behind it, which right out of the gate, that's pretty cool. But you can also limit it. So I'm going to say limit from the end, and I can say, hey, that's supposed to be 33 frames worth of a tail. And I see that we have a tail that sort of chases it
Chris,
around.
what are you going to do with these lines? Well,
we are going to actually delete that, bring back our beam. Oh, it does. I like the pattern. That the beam naturally formed, which is pretty funny because there's no forces turned on. So we'll turn those back on again. Okay, so we've got all these cubes. So here's something else the tracer can do. I'm going to select every single cube. Here's a trick. Even if somebody's been using Cinema for a while, you might not know. If you hold down Control or Command on the Mac and you click the little twirl up on any of these nulls on any object, I can hold down Control, and as I do, it will collapse the entire hierarchy. But not only does it collapse that, but it collapses every sub-object. So like all the folders just closed. And that now makes it really easy for me to select this cube, scroll to the end, and select the end one without having to like manually click between them. There's lots of ways of doing that, but that's one cool method. So we've got all those cubes selected. If I create a tracer, Cinema is smart enough to say, oh, you had those objects selected. That's what you must want to be tracing. And yes, that is what I want to be tracing, but I don't want to be tracing. If I hit play right now, we're going to be getting a tail on every single individual cube. And not only is it on every cube, it's on every point of every cube.
That's the cool.
So Chris, you might not want that, but that looks amazing.
I'm pretty sure we all want that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, there's some cool use cases. So let's step through this and look at some cool options. Instead of tracing every point, I'll just say I want to trace the midpoint, the axis of the object. So I'll just turn off don't trace vertices. So let's start that again. And now there'll be 1/4 number of lines, but you see it's a little more, it just looks cool out of the gate. And then again, we could limit, I can say limit from end, and we'll just have this be, I don't know, 55 frames worth. So now they don't live forever. And as we let these go, 55 frames later, they'll start erasing out, and we'll have this constant kind of elegant chasing line behind it. And lower that to 15, and they'll be shorter. Lower that to 5. You just get these tiny little. Let me hide the hide the forces. Okay, so you get these nice little tails chasing behind. So that's all cool. But we're not going to be using this mode at all. So I will don't limit. No limit.
Why'd you show it to us?
Because we're changing our mode from trace paths to connect all objects. And the instant I do, it kind of looks like it disappeared, but it didn't. It's hiding perfectly in between every cube, because what it's done is it interconnected every single one of them. So now we've got interconnected lines, and that is now a live spline that we can do anything we want with. And a spline, the most obvious thing here to do would be throw that into a sweep, and into that sweep. So that sweep needs 2 objects.
So that's spline in a
what
sweep.
Is the path
so that's
it's going to
in a blank.
Yeah, so right now it's like that's the path it wants to travel around. But what's the shape that's going to travel this shape? Well, let's keep it simple. We could do a circle, but I always like making an end side, because an end side is just essentially a circle that we type in exactly the number of sides that we want. So
this is a good tip, because if you've got a big scene, a circle tends to have way more geometry than you really makes way more geometry than you need in a sweep. Whereas the end side gives you a lot. It's a lot easier to control. You can control the points that a circular spline gives you, but like Chris says, the end side just it's way quicker and way easier.
Yes.
Oh, thank you guys. I didn't know.
As a way of
never throw a circle in a sweep.
Yeah, as a way of
that's what my dad always said growing up, and I never understood it, how to apply it until now. Thanks, Dad.
So this end side comes in with 6 sides, and you see very, very controllable. But I could also say
tentacle wrapped around that ball.
Yeah, or 24. But again, to show you, if we make a sphere, or I'm sorry, a circle spline, shrink that way down.
Your computer blows up.
Yeah, well, if I drop it in, you see there's just a lot more segments out of the gate. And you can change it, but I just like being able to type in the precise number that I want. And we can usually keep this pretty low poly. So keeping that pretty low poly, I can hide the polygons. NA is a shortcut. And now we just have this final beam. I can hit T for scaling, and I can scale up and down to make the beam exactly what I want it to be. And as long as we scale this down a bit, those cubes are colliding with the surface of the sphere. But the beam is small enough that it could never get there, because it's at the center of each cube. So cool. Hitting play now, we've got the beam wrapping around, doing its own crazy thing, trying to stay around, but never touching. And it can't touch each other because those cubes couldn't pass through one another. I think the beam is looking a little thin, but yeah. Let's I kind of want to fatten all this stuff up, but let's just make a larger beam. I think that's fine.
Now, we're still on the core. I'm curious how you're going to do the bolts, the blue bolts that wrap around the orange core.
Yes, that's a good question, and I'm a little concerned about that, but let's see if we can figure it out. I didn't get to test this all the way through. So, do I spend some time explaining the problem? Okay. This is a tracer. The tracer is showing a line, and that line looks great. It's a singular line. And even if I put in that sweep, like the sweep looks great. But what you don't know is that this sweep is randomly twisting around. Now, if we're coloring this something solid, it doesn't matter. It can twist and spin however you want. But you imagine that you've got like this tube, like it's a big straw, but the straw might be spinning like on the circle direction. So it's a little hard to illustrate here. But if we try and feed a different...
It may be like doing this and we don't know it because it's a smooth...
Yeah, let me see. I'm going to turn to a triangle and make it large, and let's see if we can see it spinning.
Yeah,
so that's not too bad right now.
Happening.
And it is twisting, but it's more like this base one. You see how that's like twisting around? And every once in a while might do like a really harsh, like 180 flop type of thing.
Yes.
So so that's the worry. So now let's actually show it as the actual problem. So in my head immediately, I want to go to creating a helix spline, which is just a nice big spiral slinky type shape. So shrink that down to something small. We'll do 10 again.
So I'm just curious, is there not a way to just apply I don't know what a relative distortion to it would be, because it's, you just keep going.
Yeah.
Because I think
I know what you mean. I tried that. It didn't super work out for me, but we'll see what happens.
Because I don't see it as an arc. It's just on its own.
No, I agree.
Its own extra relative.
This is just a way of displaying the problem that we're going to have.
Oh yeah, go for it.
And then we're going to randomize. Okay, so let's I'm going to spline wrap, and essentially this is a deformer that's going to say, hey, I'm going to take the points of this helix shape, and I'm going to say I want it pointed along Z, and it's going to wrap it along what? Well, I want to wrap it along the tracer object. So you can see I've got this line along the tracer. I will change the color to something bright. We'll even make it that blue color, just so we can see it, and hide the deformer. Okay, you can see we've got this nice line wrapping around. It's not exactly like a Proton stream, but if I hit play, you're going to see, well, first of all, a twist, and the twist looks good. That's almost like what we want, but you're going to see occasional pops where it'll pop in an uncontrolled way. And that's the problem, because that line is slowly rotating, which suddenly means it twisted 180 or something twisted oddly somewhere. And it's just an inherent problem in 3D in general, where it's like, what direction is it supposed to face? So that's a challenge.
Although one could argue that this being electrical zappy stuff, it's a look you want.
Yes.
Well, but then it has to be consistent in the zappy stuff.
And you could do things potentially to force it or add extra randomness in. But the point being is there's a lot of circumstances that you probably want to have control over it. So this is kind of experimental. I'm not sure if we will fully get this working, but let's see what we can do. What we need is a rail spline. A rail spline is a secondary line that says, oh, I'm the direction you should be facing. Imagine if you have a straw and a stripe on one side of the straw. You'd be saying, hey, that stripe should always be aiming at the secondary line. So that's what we're going to attempt to do. So again, I'm very glad that we have our recall tag set up, because otherwise I'd have to be loading to an older scene file and bringing this back again. So I've now reloaded it. I think I had to set that back to 200. What I need to do is create something else for a tracer to follow. Now, nulls, because a null is kind of like a folder, and the cloner will just delete empty folders, which on one level is nice, but I need to create something empty that won't get deleted. So in that case, I can just create a polygon object, any one really, like in this case, a cube. And I'll just call this rail, because it will be for our rail spline, but I don't need it to do anything. So I will make it editable, which means I've exploded it out from being a series of parameters that make a cube, and now it is merely a polygon object I could grab and manipulate and scale and extrude, and you could make a whole character out of this. But in this case, I made it editable, so I can select all of those polygons and delete them all. So now it's an empty polygon object, but that will successfully get copied. So dragging, go back to object mode, I will drag that as a child of the beam. So it's going to go everywhere that individual beam goes. I shall reset its PSR, so it zeroes out. It's now in the exact same location. And let me visualize this better. Okay, so I've now got essentially an empty point in space, and I just want to move this up into the air a little bit. So I'll move it 5 units above the main cube. Now, technically, that is still a polygon object, which means it's going to attempt to become dynamic, and I don't want it to be. So what I can do is copy this dynamics tag directly onto it, and then say, actually, you are not enabled. And now it gets ignored as that one filters down to all
so
the
it just
children.
gets ignored by being unenabled on its own.
Like local trumps global. So like as you step up to a parent, the parent will look down and be like, oh, the child already has a tag, so it can use its own.
Can we make shirts that say local trumps global and just let people interpret whatever it means?
Don't tweet that.
I feel like it probably means something I don't want it to. Anyway, continue.
Yeah, maybe. Because we keep making changes, I'm going to click override on my recall tag. And for anybody who just popped in, this is a plugin that Rocket Lasso makes, and just in case anybody was looking for the tag in their vanilla cinema. So I'll say override. So now it's stored this new information, and making that cloner editable again, going to the bottom and turning off the very last one, because we got to remember to turn that off. There we go. Hopefully, if I hit play, nothing really should have changed. Looked like it moved. Oh, I forgot to change the cube, or the cube skinny again. So I will undo and get the cube fat, because I forgot to, when I returned it, I forgot to do that. So let's even make it a little bit bigger still. So I'll say 15 by 15. There you go. Cool. Okay, now I'll override again and then make it editable. Again, scroll to the bottom, turn off that final connection, scroll to the top, or you can grab it and drag. Okay, and then did I lose? I felt like it was moving really quickly. So yeah, there was no drag on that tag. Oh, did I lose all my dynamic settings? Looks like I might have copied the wrong tag over. This one has the right settings. There we go. I just overrode it. So we should have our good settings back again. I thought it was moving quickly, so the drag is back. My fault. Okay, anyway, hitting play, this should be back to exactly where we were. The difference being is we've now made these rails. I didn't touch on it too much before, but when we made our initial setup and we were looking at these connectors, we set this angular limit to -2 and +2. And what that's saying is it can only rotate this tiny little distance in between. So there's not much rotation from cube to cube to cube, just a little bit. And we might be able to even make that smaller, but let's leave that for now. So even when I hit play, hopefully you'll see that if you look cube to cube to cube, there's not too much twisting. We can ignore the first one because it's getting yanked really hard by all the others. We could fix that, but we don't need to worry about that right now. So anyway, because we made all that editable, we do have to relink the tracer. So we can make a new tracer, or we can relink it by dragging the objects in, which I'll do. So I will lock that, which means no matter where I click, I'm still staying on these parameters. And then inside the cube, again, collapse it all, re-expand, select, scroll down, selecting all of them, drag them in, unlock, and now those are relinked, so the tracer should be alive again. But now we need a second tracer. So I'll make a duplicate and pull it out of the hierarchy. And this time I want this to be linked, and let's clear that out. So I will reset the default. I want to lock, and this time link to the rails. So it's going to be a big pain in the butt to go through all of these and select the rail, select the rail, select the rail. So let's not do that. Instead, let's click search, and I'm going to search for the word rail, and now all the rails pop up. And those are the only things in the object manager temporarily. So if I scroll down through, hold down shift, boop, I've now instantly selected all of them. And because I locked the interface, I can drag those directly in to interlink those to each other, clear out my search, so the whole hierarchy comes back, and there we go. Those have now been interlinked as well. So if this worked properly, which I hope it did, when we hide this, yeah, it's really subtle. Let's turn off that tracer. You can now see I have two lines. One of the lines is offset that 15 units that I had typed in. So hopefully this can now be our rail. So I'm going to type in rail, and then that can just be beam, or I guess it's not a beam, it's a stream. So, and let's colorize them because why not? So the main one can be that kind of neonish orange, just to keep it clear in the viewport. And we'll make the rail be blue, even though, this isn't going to be what we look at in the end.
No, but it helps.
Oh, I was locked. Unlock. Always remember to unlock because you can trip yourself up, as I just was doing. Okay, so let's make them orange again. Okay, cool. Just to keep them clear in the viewport. So the hope is, and I don't know, let's see what happens. If I hit play, do you see how there's a really clean relationship between those two lines now?
Yeah, that's nice.
So that gives us a direction, a stable direction in order to do things. So to,
Chris,
let's go back.
That's like a fruit by the foot wrapping around it. Sorry, what?
Noseman has suggested, instead of that process, you could just use an instance of the tracer and raise it on Y.
No, that's a terrible idea because it won't work once it starts twisting in space. That will only work if it's...
Noseman? A
Do you hear that?
idea.
It's a terrible idea.
Yeah, believe me, I've spent a lot of hours on that. That does work in tons of circumstances, but it would not work in this one. Not with ghosts. Ghosts are very particular. So we've got a nice, clean... Oh, man. Now we have to wrap this around a
If anyone
goat.
in the chat knows
Goats
that
aren't
reference, you get a
Goats
free
are not
copy of
particular. They'll eat
something.
anything.
We need a goat model. Is there a goat model in Cinema 4D?
The goat? It's from Muppets from Space.
Well, let's see what we get now. Well, the idea being I should be able to make a helix. Oh, I deleted the helix. I should have kept it, but let's rebuild this to 15 by 15. A lot of twists, a little bit more length on there. Once again, this is just to visually represent and see if we have solved the problem. And literally, I don't know if we did or not. So here's the spline wrap again. And again, setting it to Z. But now you can see we can feed it a spline and a rail. So feeding in that rail, let's see if that gives us a stable direction. I'm going to drag all these in the proper order of operations. Spline objects that have these remote links in the things, they have to be kind of in the order that they calculate. Otherwise, you might get one frame of feedback or one frame of lag in the viewport. So let's pop that to be nice and bright again. And let's see if we solve the problem. Yeah, that looks actually pretty good. It doesn't have a super high resolution, but it's not popping the way it was before. There's some wiggles, but that's maybe not surprising, especially based on the radius.
Now you got to like electrify it with some more
Yes,
randomness.
exactly. Yeah, that's the thought now, and we are feeding this through the spline wrap. So this having a
We
little
have
bit of that
about,
twist.
by the way, Chris, we have about 5 minutes left until our normal cutoff time. We can go until 2 if we need to. We've done that over the past several weeks, but just letting you know, like, if you feel like you're 5 minutes toward an end game, like pick that one, or otherwise let's go till 2.
Yeah, no, I'm down for whatever here. Okay, now we've got, let's make that radius like really small so there's just like a little bit of wiggle on it. And now let's try displacing it. I'm going to displace it kind of early on. So making a random, I can drag that in and that will calculate before the spline wrap. Now, normally this is an effector for things like cloners, but you can set it to deformation point mode. And now you see, and I faced the other direction. You see it made it all super duper crazy. So we could pull back on that and make that reasonable. It should be stable. It should be not animating anywhere. So we could say, okay, just you are that static line. If I turn on the spline wrap, we'll have that crazy line over there. And the hope here is that besides it twisting a little bit, like it should be super stable, which it seems to be pretty good. Okay, so I'm feeling pretty good about that. Let's animate that though. So it's a little harder to get this animating 3-dimensionally because I want to shift this from pure randomness to a noise, but the noise tends to, actually it seems to be doing an okay job directionally. So yeah, if there's still some weirdness where it's pushing on X, Y, and Z, so maybe we can stop it pushing on Z. Let's see. And then the scale is super important. So let's start increasing our scale.
It's a little jagged for Ghostbusters, but it's still
it's
a little sharp. I mean,
yeah, but it just goes to I don't like deforming things in this way. So let's try a slightly modified version, which is instead of deforming this in 2 dimensions, I'm going to only deform it in 1 at a time. So based on the direction of the effector, I would like to deform only up and down. That's the idea. So let's see what we got. Let's give that some reasonable scale, crank up the strength. There we go. So you see this is now, it's only deforming up and down. And that could actually be fine by itself. But then what I usually do is we could rename that one to .y. And even right now, just watch, it is going to move with it. I don't want it to move, so let's temporarily turn off the spline wrap. Okay, so just pay attention to this line, and let's see how the vibe we get from that. So we can individually design this line. So if we wanted that to be twice as fast, we could go twice as fast. If we wanted it to be
I'd do that.
Smoother, I could increase the scale.
The twice as fast look cool.
Yeah, so we do that, and I like the vibe there. I'll duplicate that deformation, and now we'll deform it on the other axis. So this one will become X. So that is on the X direction. I'll give it actually you can't do a different random seed. So I could move it in space, but I'll just change the speed a little bit and the scale a little bit, just so they're not identical. Yeah. And now instead of deforming on Y, we'll deform the same amount on X. Yes, on X. So now we have 2 different deformations, one up, one on X, and that gives us a fully 3-dimensional line, which again, if I play here, you see is stable and doing its own thing. So now we say, okay, cool. Now that that's happening, let's do the spline wrap. The one input that might change the bounding box, which is a little hard to explain. But if we go to bounding box, that's the box that is kind of drawing around the entire thing and saying that is what gets swept around. It's going to be constantly growing and shrinking and growing and shrinking because the line is. So I'm going to say actually fix the bounding box. So now it doesn't change over time. But that should hopefully just make it stable. And yeah, now we've got that line that is going to be doing its crazy wiggling on top of everything else. And that is something that can be swept or duplicated or made faster, more staticky.
Can we lock the beginning of it? The first one? Because it looks like it's, well, I guess it's not too wild. It just looks like if you try to attach that to a proton pack, it would.
Yes. I'd follow. Okay, yeah, totally. So, yeah.
Sorry, not start in a time sense, in a.
Yeah, you mean So you want this coming directly from like
the stream. I mean, you could probably fade it and get away with it, but
totally. Well, that's what we're going to do. We could do a spherical field, which is really straightforward. I'll make a single spherical field, which is fed into both of them, and you see its own. Now the only place getting this effect at all is the beginning point. You're going to suck
it all in right there.
Yeah, but now we can say invert, and now it doesn't apply in the beginning; it only applies later on.
That's great.
So
you did it.
And that doesn't everything else we just reactivate it, and now you see it fades off there. And you could fade this out like super over distance by it looks like it will do this, but we probably have to turn it on and off to do a refresh, and you'll fade out over space as it goes. So yeah, that is now stuck to the beginning. That should be wrapping around. We could visually hide that rail spline because it's not
actually looks like it's not doing anything.
You know what? It doesn't look like it's doing anything. Maybe it's not live there. Let me think.
Is it happening before the randoms are happening? Does it need to happen after?
Should be. No, I mean it happens here.
Oh yeah.
It's properly there, but then it's when it's getting wrapped around. Maybe
is it affected?
Maybe it's backwards. Maybe it's on the other end. Maybe that. Yeah. Look, I think that tip is fading out, so I have it backwards. We have to be on the opposite end.
Weird.
So I think if I say axis Z minus. There we go. It was just spun backwards. Thanks for catching that. I didn't even notice. Yeah,
that looks so good, dude.
Now
look at that.
We
That's so
fade
good.
it out. Yeah, that is awesome. And if we scale this up, look, see if I scale it down, the wiggle starts earlier, and we can increase this and it's going to slowly fade out along the line as we go, so it can get crazier near the end. Complete control over that as a part of the rig.
Did you put that field in the Y and X randomness?
Yes, I had both selected when I created it, so it got fed in simultaneously to both of them. So in spite of it looking like it's only under Y, there's a remote link into it on X as well. So yeah, so that is wiggling around. Let's activate that original sweep to get the main beam. Let's just make a incredibly simple material. And
that's the name of my production company.
Incredibly simple material. Let's see, no highlight, but I think maybe some color can still stay in there. I gotta look at some reference. It's kind of like somewhere between an orange and a pink, but
yeah, one might call that red, I think.
Yeah, well, it'd just be red, but it's definitely not red. It might kind of be shifting between them, but in any case.
No, it's not red. You know what? I can pull up reference, can't I? But that'd take too much time. We all know what it looked like. Yeah, why look at reference?
Yeah.
Do it from memory. It always works.
That's what I do. I do think it's more orangey.
I don't know why I'm yelling. Sorry, this is a live stream. These people can hear me through my mic.
But yeah, so now we got the main beam. We got the second blue little electrical zapper. Oh,
make that blue more deep blue rather than like the teal that it is. I feel like it's I feel like these original beams were like a much more simplified.
What is that? Oh,
colors. Could be
helix.
Wrong.
There we go. There we go. Maybe I can.
It looks like it's like you start from an animated place, and I feel like in the composite you'd end up bringing out like I feel like it starts to look organic once you have the glows, and so you have this like deep blue glow. Anyway, I'm gonna shut up. But that's now you can't see it, so you probably should go back to the teal.
Yeah, it's funny, but I think you are right that it is that darker color, but we're just not in an environment to show that too well. So cool. Anyway, as one last little detail, just because it's so easy to do, let's clean this up and group the appropriate things. So let's just call this, we'll just call this Proton stream.
Don't forget to save at some point, by the way.
Oh, fine. Okay.
Hey, don't tell Chris what to do.
Good call.
Actually,
okay. I'm selecting everything that's relevant to this particular stream here. I'll just make a child of that Proton stream. So if we have any
Which I believe
luck
is
here,
the plot of the new Ghostbusters Afterlife.
Now, if this hopefully works, I can copy and paste that entire null. Let's spin that 180 and scoot it over here and scoot it over there. And we've got a second Ghostbuster now. And now
shooting
they
at each
hit
other.
Go. And we get two beams, both of them independently going for the ghost. But because of the way we built the rig, all of the forces are still pushing them apart, even though it's from a completely different stream. So they're still not going to cross the streams. Let's scale this up with a double beam. I think we need a little more room for them to be fighting, but
you freaking genius.
So yeah, that's live, dynamic, ready to go. Doesn't intersect, complete control. There's a lot of things we can do as far as like smoothing out the beam as it goes. You could add, like I said, a bunch of layered effects on top of that. We could add electricity dots on top of it. We could have particles start emitting from the individual splines. So you get like those fall away ones like in the animation you showed, which looked amazing. So yeah, this is just the starting point, but this is now a dynamic rig that's being controlled by the forces and by field force.
That's so freaking cool. Chris.
I just love watching it move, Chris. It's so
seriously,
pretty.
I love watching it caress the ghost.
Yeah, there's a lot going on now, so maybe I'll lower it back to 1 because it just looks nice and smooth in real time. But yeah, man, it's so cool. I love doing this type of stuff. Like dynamics in cinema are so much fun to play around with and just make weird, crazy things.
Yeah.
Like you have unlimited potential for combining.
That's one of the things I love the most about Cinema 4D is it is just fun to play with.
Yeah, there's so much exploration.
It's just I love it. It's so much fun.
Let's crank up the randomness a little bit more.
Chris, dude, this is amazing.
Power.
Before we wrap up, I do want to check in with my usual co-host, Hashi is, like I said, on vacation this week, and I believe we have video. I know he's been in the chat talking, but I believe we have video I was able to procure from his vacation. Let's just see what he's up to.
I'm so excited. I cannot just wait. Did you hear him do something? Stop it. I will lose control when I think I like it. I'm so excited.
Okay, you're a married man, Hashi. That really isn't appropriate. So, Chris,
I would have bet money that you're going to pull up the baby, the dancing clown again.
Oh yeah, I really should have. God, that would have been so good. I should have. No, that was content to where Phil there we personified over the course of several tutorials and weeks. But I realized I hope someone out there was watching this and who the hell is that guy in the car? That makes absolutely no sense.
Hey, Chris, Bobby from the chat is wondering why we're not using mesh to spline in this rig.
Well, once we made that first beam, you'd still need the rail spline, so we could have done it. There's places we could sneak it in here, but we were running out of time. But I will say, now you brought the topic back up again, today is the last day of the launch sale, and there is a $10 off coupon. So if anybody's interested, I got to look up the coupon code, though. Give me a second. Yeah, stay off my screen for a moment. Okay.
You're good. I'm on the video.
So when you go to checkout on Gumroad, if you use discount code, no, not that one, countdown10, one word, countdown10, do all caps, and it's $10 off, and that will only be through today.
Is the 10 a word or a number?
A number. I don't know if I can paste this.
Countdown
in the chat,
10.
but I'll try.
Awesome.
So yeah, thanks everybody, and thanks you guys for having me on.
Chris, dude, thank you for
fun.
being on the show. This was literally one of my favorite episodes we've done. I learned an absolute ton because, as I've said before, every time I open up Cinema 4D and need to use it for something, I relearn it so fast. There it is in the chat, countdown 10. I relearn it so fast because Cinema 4D, so much of that is intuitive, and then I finish the project and then I forget everything I learned. And
I do sympathize.
I have to go back and watch one of your tutorials or any other tutorials that are out there and have to figure, and I relearn, that's how I do this. That's how I do that. So this was one of those. I now feel like I can go do this. And by next week, I'll be like, can we bring Chris back in so I can make the Proton stream? Is there anything you want to, we've hyped your new product. You've got another product coming up soon, RocketLasso.com. Where else can people find you on social?
It's at Rocket Lasso on all the things, on Instagram, on Twitter. So I don't regularly post, but it's all useful stuff. I don't try and spam with any weird things. I don't post
Very
often.
useful.
There's also a newsletter you can find. Oh, and the big thing is I have a Slack channel. And if you're a person who likes helping people, asking questions, there's weekly and monthly challenges where people do different topics. There's group projects sometimes, people just help each other. So if you would like to be part of that community, you can also find that by going to RocketLasso.com. It's just a Slack channel where everybody, I post links, we do stuff. I run my betas for the software out of that. And then of course I do my weekly live stream. So every Wednesday I do a 2-hour live stream at 2:00 Central Time, which would be what time on the West Coast?
2 o'clock before 12 would be 12 o'clock.
At noon. Yeah. So for 2 hours every Wednesday, I just take questions live from the chat, and usually we get to do 4 or 5 questions. People ask about cool, weird techniques, and we just tackle them live and try and figure them out, which is always a lot of fun.
That's awesome. So. Chris, thank you for being here. Everybody, please go throw all your money at Chris and all of your eyes at Rocket Lasso, and tune in next week to find out how Hashi's vacation went. And again, if you have any recommendations or suggestions or requests for visual effects that we can do on the show, or classic movies for us to do in any of our classic VFX episodes that we have planned for the future, please leave them in the chat or find us all on social media. But the most important thing is have an absolutely excellent weekend. We love you guys. Chris, thanks again for being here. We'll see you next time.
Thanks so much.